In doing legal research over the years, I have often been asked to give a basic introduction to the concept of international law. What I generally say is this: international law is the accumulation of common state practice, which has been regularly followed over a long period of time, or which has been adopted by means of various international covenants or conventions. At the same time, it is important to note an additional point. The majority of rules of international law, which are followed today, have developed since the early 1800s. When speaking of Taiwan, we need to be aware of these concepts. Some people would like to tell us that based on one or two press releases, declarations, or proclamations issued by certain world leaders, followed later by the holding of formal surrender ceremonies, the territorial sovereignty of Taiwan could be transferred from Japan to China. This is what they claim is a valid methodology for completing the transfer of territorial sovereignty. However, we must ask, what other similar examples have occurred where the international community has recognized this methodology as being valid? The answer is there are none. There has been no accumulation of common state practice which can be cited. Hence, we can quickly see that the Japanese surrender ceremonies on October 25, 1945 cannot be interpreted as Taiwan Retrocession Day. Going back earlier, we know that Taiwan was ceded to Japan by the Chinese Emperor in 1895. Even today, however, we often hear some Asian scholar making the allegation that some Chinese officials announced the cancellation or nullification of this treaty in the late 1930s, and that Taiwan reverted to Chinese sovereignty at that point. We quickly see that this is a situation where they are claiming some valid methodology for the cancellation of an international treaty and the restoration of the so-called original legal parameters. Again, we must ask what other similar examples have occurred where the international community has recognized this methodology as being valid. After thorough investigation, we have to conclude that there are none. We then quickly come to the realization that at the most basic level, these scholars have a poor understanding of the concept of international law. After establishing this conceptual framework, let's move on to the discussion of other interesting topics as we continue our series of commonly seen mistakes when discussing the legal status of Taiwan.
Commonly Seen Mistakes, Part 2.
The military occupation of Taiwan ended in 1952.
After the war, the military occupation of territory separated from the mother country via the specifications of a peace treaty does not end with the coming into force of the peace treaty. The U.S. Supreme Court has ruled on this issue on many occasions.
Military occupation is conducted under military government. Hence, if Taiwan is occupied territory, we would expect to find some specifications about military government in the San Francisco Peace Treaty.
Indeed, the relevant specifications are quite clear. The treaty directly stipulates United States military government, USMG, jurisdiction over Taiwan. Has the U.S. executive branch enforced this provision? No. The executive branch officials have treated the San Francisco Peace Treaty as a lost treaty and have instead concentrated on selling military arms to a government in exile on Taiwanese soil, the Republic of China.
Under relevant U.S. Supreme Court precedent, Taiwan may be aptly described as foreign territory under the dominion of the United States. Accordingly, it falls under the Common Defense Clause of the U.S. Constitution.
Viewed this way, it should be no secret that U.S. defense companies would find a much larger market for their equipment, construction projects, defense services, etc., if they would urge the U.S. executive branch to follow the specifications of the SFPT straightforwardly and have the U.S. Department of Defense take full responsibility for Taiwan's national defense needs directly. This, of course, would include personnel, equipment, and everything else.
The Republic of China is the occupying power of Taiwan. Hence, its government officers can decide how to make all laws and regulations.
The Republic of China is only exercising delegated administrative authority for the military occupation of Taiwan. The occupying power, or more properly, the principal occupying power, is the conqueror. What does this mean? During the period of World War II in the Pacific beginning December 1941, all military attacks against Taiwan were conducted by U.S. military forces. The military forces of other countries including England, France, the USSR, Australia, New Zealand, the Republic of China, etc. did not participate. Hence, the United States of America is the principal occupying power of Taiwan. Under the specifications of General Order No. 1, issued by General Douglas MacArthur, the Republic of China in Taiwan is merely a proxy occupying force. Importantly, there are many actions which are forbidden in occupied territory. Relevant specifications can be found in the Hague and Geneva Conventions. One important action which is forbidden is the promulgation of a new legal structure.
Hence, the promulgation of the ROC Constitution in occupied Taiwan in 1947 is entirely illegal.
Unfortunately, such an analysis is totally beyond the comprehension of most civilians, because they have essentially no knowledge of military law or the laws of war.
Taiwan was incorporated into Republic of China national territory via procedures in the ROC Constitution regarding new territory.
In fact, Taiwan has never been incorporated into ROC national territory. Article 4 of the ROC Constitution, entered into force December 25, 1947, specifies that
the territory of the Republic of China within its existing national boundaries shall not be altered, except by a resolution of the National Assembly.
in regard to the alleged inclusion of Taiwan into Chinese territory, up to the present day there is no resolution of the National Assembly on record. Moreover, the post-war treaties did not award Taiwan to China. Of course, many people point out that Taiwan was already under the jurisdiction of the ROC when the ROC Constitution was promulgated and came into force in 1947. But this is questionable reasoning on two counts. In 1947, Taiwan was still under belligerent occupation. So, number one, there had not been any transfer of Taiwan's territorial sovereignty to China, and Taiwan was not part of China's national territory. Then, number two, the promulgation of an entirely new legal structure in occupied territory is a serious violation of the Hague and Geneva Conventions. Such violations are commonly known as war crimes.
With no final disposition of Taiwan in the peace treaty, sovereignty is held by the local Taiwanese people.
An examination of the subject of territorial cession under international law shows that it is an action between governments. Examples of this in United States history are very representative. There was Louisiana in 1803, Florida in 1821, California in 1848, Alaska in 1867, Guam in 1899, Puerto Rico in 1899, Virgin Islands in 1917, etc. After examining these historical events, we are forced to reach the conclusion that territorial sovereignty is held by a government. It is not held by any amalgamous group of people. In direct contrast to this, there is a concept of popular sovereignty, which is found in constitutional law studies. This is a very different concept from territorial sovereignty. It is often heard that the Taiwanese people enjoy popular sovereignty.
In practice, this just means that under the authority of the illegitimate ROC Constitution, they are being given the right to vote and to elect their quote-unquote representatives to various levels of local councils, to the legislature, presidency, etc.
Looking at the treaty specifications for Cuba after the Spanish-American War and Taiwan after World War II in the Pacific, both are territory conquered by the USA, which have not reached a final political status. In other words, they have been left in political limbo under the jurisdiction of the United States military government. However, as in the situation of Cuba, the United States executive branch officials should be nurturing local groups in Taiwan to come together to form their own civil government. This is the established precedent for dealing with conquered territory. This precedent was followed in Iraq as well.